Get Labour's view then on this morning's developments. As you can see, I'm now joined by the Shadow Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. What is your reaction to the news of this apparent Israeli strike on Iran overnight?
I think it's a really concerning moment for peace and security in the Middle East. This is obviously a breaking story. My understanding is the precise details of the strike that's taken place haven't been confirmed by the US, Iran or Israel. But Labour would urge all sides to show restraint and to de-escalate the situation, because the real risk of a full-scale war in the region is there and all sides need to step back.
Following on from Iran's attack on Israel last week, though, does Labour support Israel's right to take retaliatory action in Iran?
Well, we're asking Israel to show restraint in doing so. The repelling of the very significant drone and missile strike was successful. We want them to show restraint, to de-escalate the situation, because, as I said, the risk of a full-scale conflagration in the region is very real and the consequences will be dire.
So is there a limit to Labour's support for Israel?
I don't think there's a limit to our support in terms of their right to respond, but what we are urging, along with all of our international partners, is restraint on Israel's part, because we don't want to see further escalation and the risk of a full-scale regional war, which the consequences of which would be absolutely devastating to the region. So we're asking, as I said, all sides to pull back.
How concerned are you about escalation? Do you expect Iran to retaliate?
I think that we can't speculate on how Iran might retaliate. What the precise nature of these strikes is, as I said, on the basis of my understanding, is unconfirmed. But I think it is a very worrying moment for the Middle East, and the risk of escalation into a wider regional war is very real. That is why it is so important, I say, that both Israel and Iran pull back and de-escalate and show restraint.
OK, this is a story that obviously we'll be covering all morning here on Sky News. But while I've got you here, I do want to talk about a couple of domestic issues as well, because the Prime Minister is going to make a big speech later on today. He's vowing to clamp down on what he calls Britain's sick note culture. He's warning against over-medicalising the everyday challenges and worries of life. Does he have a point? Do you support an end to sick note culture in this country?
Well, I think this announcement screams to me a government that, after 14 years, are out of ideas and out of time. This proposal, as I understand it, is a consultation on tweaks to the fit note system. It's actually a proposal that was first mooted by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, back when he was Health Secretary in 2017. And in the years since, we have seen the number of people transition onto long-term sick at great cost to themselves, to businesses, to the economy, and to the taxpayer in terms of the spiralling benefit bill skyrocket. So economic activity is at its highest rate for decades. We're still the only G7 country that hasn't returned to economic activity rates pre-pandemic. This is costing the country. Something's got to be done. I don't think tinkering with a call for evidence on the fit note system is anywhere near the scale of the challenge. Labour have a solution to tackle the fundamental causes of this crisis, which are staggeringly long NHS waiting lists, a social security system that needs reform, making work pay, supporting people into good long-term jobs.
Well, yes, and you have vowed to bring the sickness benefits bill down yourself, haven't you? You've said there'd be no option of a life on benefits under Labour, but just saying you're going to get waiting lists down sounds pretty vague. Some would say you need a more targeted approach.
Well, I think waiting lists, as I've just said, is only one part of our plan to tackle economic activity. We've got to bring those waiting lists down. We've got to do more on mental health support. We've also got to reform social security. We've got to make job centres work, provide people with real support, make work pay. This is a long-term problem. This is entirely of the Tories' making. It's a crisis that has developed over many years, and it needs a plan, as we have, that tackles the fundamental causes, that doesn't just tweak with elements of the system like the fit note system, which can provide people with more support. And if I was the government, I'd be saying, how can the fit note system fully support people back into work? Where is the investment in the health and work professionals that need to provide people with that support?
What's the fundamental problem that's going on here? Because the number of fit notes has doubled in less than a decade to 11 million a year. It's a huge rise. Why is that happening?
Because there has been a long-term rise for many, many years under this government in people who are on long-term sick, either because they can't get the treatment they need through the NHS, which is on its knees after 14 years of Conservative government, or they're not getting the proper support to get back into work.
Do GPs sign people off too easily, do you think?
No, I think that sort of these simplistic, sweeping statements aren't just not helpful. We need to look at the root causes of the problem. why we have such staggeringly high economic activity rates under this Conservative government and look to tackle the fundamentals. This, to me, as I said, is a policy paper that's dusted off from 2017 to get a cheap headline. It won't tackle the fundamental causes of the problem as it's developed.
OK, I also want to ask you about one other issue, which is Mark Menzies, the Tory MP, who's now been suspended from the party after claims which he denies that he misused party funds. I understand that Labour has now written to Lancashire Police. Can you tell us what you've asked them to do?
We've asked them to investigate these allegations, and I think it's entirely right that we've done so. The reports that came out about this case are incredibly disturbing, and there are a series of questions about whether an offence has been committed in relation to fraud by false representation or misconduct in public office. They're quite serious allegations. It's right that the police investigate. I think there are also questions about what the Conservative Party knew and when, why they've sat on this information for months. Do they have any information that the police could benefit from? If they do, they obviously need to hand it over. It's in the public interest that we get to the bottom of these allegations and the police investigate.
OK, well, as we say, Mark Menzies denies all the claims against him. Matthew Pennycook, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed.